The disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Unsolved mystery. In May 2007, a young British family traveled to a sunny resort town in Portugal, searching for rest and joy. For Kate and Jerry McCann, this was meant to be a simple holiday, a break from the stresses of everyday life, a chance to enjoy the beach, good food, and time with their 3 children. But within days, their lives would be turned upside down. On the evening of May 3rd, in the quiet resort of Praia da Luz, their 3-year-old daughter, Madeleine, vanished from the family's holiday apartment. What began as a desperate search in the narrow streets of a coastal village quickly spiraled into one of the most famous missing child cases in the world. A story that would ignite international headlines, spark countless theories, and raise uncomfortable questions about the investigation, about the role of the media, and about why some missing children capture the world's attention while others are left in silence. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz was meant to be a safe haven for families. Rows of holiday apartments overlooked a pool, gardens, and narrow cobblestone streets that led down to the Atlantic coast. It was a place where children played freely and parents felt they could relax. For the McCanns, doctors from the UK, this was a much-needed escape. They were part of a larger holiday group of friends, nicknamed by the press as the Tapas 9. Each evening, the adults would meet for dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant, only a short walk from their apartments. Their arrangement was simple. Every half hour, someone would quietly check on the children. On May 3rd, 2007, the routine began as always. Around 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann left the table to check on Madeleine and the twins. He later recalled looking down at his daughter sleeping peacefully, her toy by her side, before quietly returning to dinner. At 9:30, another member of the group, Matthew Oldfield, offered to check. He approached the McCann's apartment but didn't enter the bedroom. Instead, he listened from the doorway, convinced all was well. That small decision, not stepping inside, would later haunt the investigation. At 9:15, another friend, Jane Tanner, walked past the apartment on her way back from checking her own children. She later claimed to have seen a man carrying a small child in pajamas, heading away from the resort. At the time, she thought little of it. Only later would this sighting become one of the most controversial pieces of the puzzle. Shortly after 10 p.m., it was Kate's turn. She opened the door expecting silence, expecting her daughter's steady breathing. But what she found instead was a parent's worst nightmare. The bedroom window was open, the shutters were raised, and Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate ran back to the restaurant, her voice trembling as she cried out the words that would echo through the years. "They've taken her!" Panic spread. Resort staff, guests, and neighbors rushed into action. They combed the gardens, the poolside, the narrow village streets. Some searched the beach with flashlights, calling Madeleine's name into the night air. In the confusion, dozens of people entered and exited the McCann's apartment, unknowingly trampling over possible evidence. Curtains were moved, doors touched, beds disturbed. By midnight, there was still no trace of the little girl. The so-called golden hours, those first critical moments when a child's life can most often be saved, slipped away. Questions lingered even then. Had Madeleine been taken by a stranger? Could she have wandered off into the darkness? Or had something else happened entirely inside that apartment? Even today, those questions remain unanswered. When the alarm was raised, local officers from the GNR, the Guardia Nacional Republicana, were dispatched. But by the time they arrived, More than an hour had already passed since Kate's discovery. That first night was crucial. In child abduction cases, experts stress the importance of the golden hours. Roadblocks, airport alerts, and forensic containment can make the difference between life and death. But in Praia da Luz, those hours slipped away. The scene at apartment 5A was chaotic. Instead of being sealed off, the space became a revolving door. Friends rushed in to comfort the McCanns. Resort staff came and went. Even neighbors and strangers entered, trying to help. Curtains were pulled aside, doors opened, furniture moved. Potential fingerprints and fibers were smudged, scattered, or erased entirely. Later, investigators admitted that by dawn, the apartment had become almost useless as a crime scene. Worse still, there were no immediate roadblocks. Cars were not stopped or searched as they left the village. No boats were checked at the nearby marina. Interpol was not alerted until nearly a full day later. By then, if Madeleine had been taken, her abductor could have been far beyond Portugal's borders. Witness statements, too, were mishandled. Multiple people reported unusual sightings. Jane Tanner described the man carrying a child in pajamas near the apartment at 9:15 p.m. Another witness recalled seeing a man loitering around the resort earlier in the week. But these leads weren't aggressively pursued. Some accounts were written down inaccurately. Others were dismissed as unreliable. The investigation quickly fell under criticism. Many argued that the local police had little experience with high-profile abductions. Praia da Luz was a holiday town, not a city accustomed to international crime. And as the hours turned into days, the lack of progress created an atmosphere of mistrust between the Portuguese authorities, the British investigators who later arrived, and the McCanns themselves. From the very beginning, questions swirled. Had crucial mistakes doomed the investigation from the start? Were the authorities looking in the wrong direction? Or was this a case where the truth had slipped away forever in those first critical hours? In the early weeks, police insisted they were treating Madeleine's disappearance as an abduction. But as weeks turned into months, their focus shifted. And shockingly, suspicion began to fall on Kate and Jerry McCann themselves. At first, it was the small details. Investigators questioned why the McCanns and their friends had chosen to leave young children alone while dining at the tapas bar. Why not use the resort's babysitting service? Why keep the doors unlocked? For detectives trained to scrutinize inconsistencies, these choices seemed careless at best, suspicious at worst. Then came the observations about behavior. Some officers noted that Kate appeared too composed in public interviews, while Jerry was described as calm, almost clinical. Others pointed to moments where the couple seemed to control their emotions in ways that didn't match expectations of grieving parents. But grief is not a script. And yet, every word, every expression, every tear or lack of tears was picked apart by a judgmental public and an increasingly skeptical police force. In August 2007, a dramatic twist deepened the suspicion. British police dogs, highly trained to detect human blood and the scent of a corpse, were brought to Portugal. According to reports, they alerted inside the McCann's apartment and later in a rental car the family had hired weeks after Madeleine vanished. Samples were collected, and Portuguese authorities claimed the results suggested a possible match to Madeleine's DNA. The press seized on the story. Headlines screamed that Madeleine had died in the apartment and that her parents had hidden the truth. Conspiracy theories exploded, painting the McCanns as villains in a grim cover-up. By September 2007, 4 months after their daughter vanished, Kate and Jerry were officially declared arguidos, formal suspects. The The parents who had begged the world to help them find their daughter were now being accused of involvement in her disappearance. The backlash in Britain was fierce. Supporters argued that the Portuguese police, under pressure to deliver answers, had turned against the grieving parents instead of following real leads. Experts questioned the reliability of the forensic evidence, noting that DNA samples were partial and inconclusive. The dogs, while powerful tools, were not infallible. This clash became not just a legal battle, but a cultural one. British media defending the McCanns as victims of injustice, Portuguese outlets portraying them as cold and suspicious, and in the middle of it all was the unanswered question. If the parents were guilty, where was the proof? If they were innocent, why had the investigation turned against them so quickly? By the summer of 2007, Praia da Luz no longer felt like a quiet resort town. Satellite trucks lined the narrow streets. Dozens of journalists camped outside apartment 5A, their cameras pointed at the McCanns' every move. News anchors broadcast live from the square. Reporters scrambled for new angles, and Madeleine's photographs stared back from front pages around the world. British tabloids in particular seized on the story. Every day brought fresh headlines, some sympathetic, others wildly speculative. One day the parents were victims, the next they were suspects. Rumors were printed as fact, contradictions ignored. It became a media circus that blurred the line between journalism and entertainment. In Portugal, the tone was very different. Local newspapers criticized the British press for sensationalism and for overshadowing Portuguese voices. Some residents grew resentful. Why does the whole world care about one missing British girl when our own tragedies are ignored? And indeed, the imbalance was striking. That same year, hundreds of children went missing across Europe. Their names barely made local papers, let alone international headlines. Commentators began to call this phenomenon the Madeleine effect. The idea that certain children, often white, blonde, middle class, became global symbols while countless others remained invisible. It was a painful truth. The intensity of coverage raised awareness for Madeleine, but also highlighted deep inequalities in how societies value lives. Why did her disappearance spark global campaigns, papal blessings, and multi-million-pound investigations, while others faded silently into statistics? For the McCanns, this spotlight was a double-edged sword. The attention kept their daughter's face alive in the public imagination, increasing the chances that someone, somewhere, might come forward with a clue. But it also placed them under relentless scrutiny. Their parenting, their marriage, even their body language became daily fodder for headlines. The media frenzy was so all-consuming that Madeleine herself often seemed to vanish behind the coverage. The story had become bigger than the child at its center. And yet, through all the noise, the most important fact remained. A 3-year-old girl was still missing. As weeks turned into months without a breakthrough, investigators began casting a wider net. And soon, the spotlight fell on a man who lived just down the road from the Ocean Club, Robert Murat. Murat was a British-Portuguese real estate consultant, living with his mother in a house barely 150 meters from apartment 5A. Fluent in English and Portuguese, he quickly inserted himself into the chaos after Madeleine's disappearance. He spoke with journalists, translated between locals and foreign press, and seemed always nearby. At first, his presence was welcomed, but soon some reporters grew uneasy. Why was he always around? Why was he so eager to help? In May 2007, a group of British journalists passed their suspicions to the police. Within days, Murat's life was turned upside down. His home was searched, computers and phones seized, police dogs combed the property, and the press broadcast live as detectives carried out boxes of evidence. Murat was declared an arguido, a formal suspect. For a time, headlines painted him as the man who might have stolen Madeleine. But as the months passed, the case against him unraveled. Witnesses who swore they saw him near the apartment admitted later they weren't certain. Forensic searches of his house turned up nothing. No physical evidence tied him to Madeleine. By 2008, Robert Murat was formally cleared. Still, the damage was done. His reputation was shattered, his family harassed, his name forever linked to the case. Years later, he successfully sued several newspapers for defamation, a rare moment of accountability in a saga defined by reckless speculation. Murat's ordeal was not unique. Dozens of locals, holiday staff, and even tourists were pulled into the investigation, questioned or rumored to be involved. Each new theory became a headline, each rumor a temporary solution, and yet none of it brought anyone closer to finding Madeleine. The shifting spotlight revealed a grim truth. In the absence of evidence, anyone could become the villain of the week. And while police and press chased false leads, the real trail, if there ever was one, grew colder by the day. By 2011, 4 long years had passed. The Portuguese investigation had stalled, the McCanns had been cleared as suspects, and the world's media had largely moved on. But in Britain, pressure was building. Madeleine's face still appeared in tabloids. Her parents still campaigned tirelessly, and questions still haunted the public. Why had no one been able to find this child? Under mounting pressure, then Prime Minister David Cameron asked Scotland Yard to take a fresh look. A new inquiry was launched, codenamed Operation Grange. At its peak, more than 30 detectives were assigned to re-examine every shred of evidence. Their task was not only to review the Portuguese files, but also to start from scratch, as if the case had just begun. For the McCanns, this was a glimmer of hope. The family had lobbied relentlessly for renewed efforts, and now Britain's top investigators were on the case. But for critics, the operation raised hard questions. Why was this one child's case receiving millions of pounds in funding, while countless other missing children's files gathered dust? Was this justice, or was it privilege? In the early years, Operation Grange produced new theories. Detectives proposed that Madeleine may have been the victim of a lone intruder who had targeted holiday apartments in the Algarve. They examined the possibility of a burglary gone wrong or a predator who had watched the McCanns' routine. In 2014, teams of British officers working alongside Portuguese police carried out dramatic new searches. Heavy machinery dug into wastelands near Praia da Luz. Sniffer dogs scoured fields. For days, television cameras broadcast live, raising expectations that a breakthrough was finally coming. But nothing of significance was found. Despite this, the investigation remained one of the most expensive in British history, costing taxpayers more than £13 million. Supporters argued that no price was too high for finding a missing child. Critics said the money could have saved dozens of others if spent differently. The divide reflected the very heart of the case. For some, Madeleine symbolized every missing child. For others, she represented the unfair imbalance of who receives justice and who is forgotten. Still, the inquiry pressed on. And in 2020, more than a decade after Madeleine vanished, Operation Grange pointed to a chilling new name, a convicted German sex offender already behind bars who had lived in the Algarve at the very time Madeleine disappeared. His name was Christian Brückner. In June 2020, German authorities made a dramatic announcement. They had a prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. His name was Christian Brückner, a German national with a long criminal history that stretched across Europe. Brückner's past was deeply troubling. From a young age, he was in and out of prison for theft, drug dealing, and sexual offenses. His record included abuse of minors and violent assaults. He had lived a transient life, moving from Germany to Spain, then to Portugal, often staying in rundown houses, caravans, or even abandoned properties. During the mid-2000s, Brückner lived in the Algarve, not far from Praia da Luz. He often drove around in a yellow and white VW camper van, a vehicle that several witnesses later recalled seeing near the Ocean Club resort. On the night Madeleine vanished, phone records placed him in the immediate area. Investigators later confirmed he had received a phone call that evening, close to apartment 5A. German prosecutors pointed to other disturbing details. In 2005, Brückner had been accused of breaking into a villa in Portugal and brutally raping a 72-year-old woman, an attack that bore chilling similarities to what some believed might have happened to Madeleine. He was later convicted for that crime. When news of Brückner's connection to the case broke, prosecutors said they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead and that Brückner was responsible. But they refused to disclose the nature of that evidence. For the public, this secrecy was both frustrating and suspicious. His past behavior also raised questions. Brückner was known for violent outbursts, drug trafficking, and a pattern of targeting vulnerable victims. Yet despite the claims, no DNA, no eyewitness, no physical proof has ever directly tied him to Madeleine's disappearance. He has consistently denied involvement, calling the accusations a witch hunt. For investigators, Brückner remains the most compelling suspect in years. For skeptics, he is simply another name added to a long list of dead ends. And so, more than 17 years later, the case still hangs in limbo, poised between breakthrough and mystery, between hope and despair. For Kate and Jerry McCann, life after May 3, 2007, became a relentless campaign of survival. They were not only grieving parents, but also unwilling public figures, forced to navigate cameras, headlines, and suspicion, all while clinging to the hope that their daughter was still alive. In the months following Madeleine's disappearance, the couple launched the Find Madeleine campaign. Posters were translated into dozens of languages. Her image appeared on billboards, television screens, even in football stadiums across Europe. Celebrities like David Beckham and J.K. Rowling lent their voices. Pope Benedict XVI blessed a photo of Madeleine in St. Peter's Square. For a time, it seemed the whole world was looking for one little girl. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, vigils were held. Kate and Jerry stood before crowds with candles, speaking words of determination, refusing to let their daughter's memory fade. Kate wrote a memoir, pouring her heartbreak and persistence into words that millions would read. But the spotlight came with cruelty. Online forums swirled with conspiracy theories. Strangers accused them of lies, of exploitation, of covering up some hidden truth. They became the targets of harassment, tabloids twisting their grief into headlines. For the McCanns, it was a second wound layered over the first. Still, they pressed forward. Over the years, age progression images were released by police, digitally altered portraits showing what Madeleine might look like at age 6, at age 9, at age 12. Each image carried a silent plea. Look at her face. She could be anywhere. Please don't stop searching. And there were reasons not to give up. The history of missing children holds rare but powerful stories of survival. In the United States, Elizabeth Smart was rescued after 9 months in captivity. J.C. Dugard was found after 18 years. These cases reminded the world that time does not always erase hope. If others could be found after years, why not Madeleine? For her younger siblings, Sean and Amelie, growing up meant carrying the absence of a sister they barely remembered. Their childhood was marked by photographs on walls, vigils in public squares, and an unspoken ache at the center of their family. The McCann's fight was no longer just about their daughter. It became a symbol of how societies treat missing children, a call for reform, and a reminder of how unevenly justice is distributed. But beneath the campaigns, the interviews, and the global debates, there was always the same quiet, desperate question: where is Madeleine? Nearly 2 decades have passed since the night of May 3, 2007, when 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from apartment 5A in Praia da Luz. In those years, police files have swelled to tens of thousands of pages, suspects have been named and cleared, and new leads have risen and collapsed. And yet the central mystery remains untouched. What happened to Madeleine? The case has exposed painful realities: how fragile an investigation can be when crucial mistakes are made in the first hours. How media attention can both keep a child's face alive and distort the truth. How privilege and circumstance shape which children the world chooses to fight for and which ones are forgotten. For some, Madeleine has become a symbol of failure, a case mishandled, a truth buried. For others, she is a symbol of endurance, the idea that even after years, answers might still surface. If she is alive, Madeleine would now be a young woman in her 20s. The age progression images released over the years try to capture that possibility, each one carrying both hope and heartbreak. Somewhere out there, could she still be living under another name, another life? Or did her story end that night, lost in the silence of Praia da Luz? Theories abound. Some believe Christian Brückner is the key, a predator finally unmasked. Others think the truth lies in mistakes made closer to home, or in leads that were overlooked. And still more believe we may never truly know, that Madeleine's fate is destined to remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of our time. But behind all the speculation is the simple fact of a little girl gone too soon, her family left searching for answers. For Kate and Jerry McCann, the fight continues. They hold on to hope, because what else can a parent do? And for the rest of us, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann stands as both a tragedy and a question, one that lingers long after the headlines fade. Every secret waits to be revealed. Every silence that carries an echo, every story is waiting to be told. This was her secret. What about yours? What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters. Subscribe and step into the echoes of truth.